Close your eyes and breathe in. If you grew up in the 1960s or early 70s, you know that smell instantly. It wasn't the sterile, chemical odor of a modern convenience store. It was the heavy, sweet, intoxicating scent of leaded gasoline, mixed with the faint aroma of motor oil and hot asphalt. You're pulling a heavy, steel-bodied sedan into a service station, not a gas station, but a service station. The moment your tires roll over the black rubber hose on the pavement, a double chime rings out through the air. Ding, ding! Before you can even put the car in park, a man in a crisp, pressed uniform and a cap steps out from the garage. He doesn't wait for you to get out. You don't get out. He greets you with a smile, and as the pump begins to whir, he's already washing your windshield and checking your oil. And then you look at the spinning mechanical dials of the pump. The numbers aren't flying by like a high-speed blur. They move with a steady, rhythmic click. You watch the total sale window. For $5, you could fill a 20-gallon tank from empty to overflowing and still have change left over for a pack of gum and a glass bottle of Coca-Cola. In 1965, the average price for a gallon of regular was 31 cents. High test or ethyl might have cost you 35 cents. This wasn't just a low price, it was the price of total American mobility. Gasoline was the lifeblood of the open road. It meant that a weekend trip wasn't a line item in your budget, it was a basic right. It meant the American family was untethered, free to explore a continent that felt limitless. But as we sit today at a self-service pump, staring at a digital screen that demands we join the rewards club while we watch $40, $60, or $80 vanish from our bank accounts, we have to ask, what happened to the 30-cent gallon? Was it just a matter of time and inflation, or did the very nature of energy change? As economic archaeologists, we need to look beneath the gas station floor. We need to uncover the 1970s energy heist that turned a cheap commodity into a global weapon of financial control. To find the turning point, we have to go back to October 1973. For the generation that lived through it, this was the end of innocence for the American economy. Before 1973, America produced most of its own oil. We were a self-sufficient giant. But as our appetite for energy grew and our domestic production peaked, we became vulnerable. When the OPEC nations announced an oil embargo in response to geopolitical conflicts, the service station turned into a stress station overnight. We all remember the lines, cars stretching for miles down suburban boulevards, the odd-even rationing days, the handwritten signs on the pumps that simply said, "out." For the first time, the American family realized that their freedom was at the mercy of a global valve they didn't control. But the archaeology of this crisis revealed something deeper than just a shortage. It reveals a massive financial restructuring. Recall our previous investigation into 1971, the year Nixon closed the gold window. With the dollar no longer backed by gold, the U.S. government needed a new way to ensure the world still wanted our fiat currency. They found the answer in 1974 in a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple but profound. The United States would provide military protection and hardware to the Saudis. In exchange, Saudi Arabia and eventually all of OPEC would agree to price their oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Suddenly, every country on Earth needed U.S. dollars, not because they were as good as gold, but because they were as necessary as oil. This ensured that the U.S. could continue to print money to fund its deficits because the rest of the world had to hold those dollars to buy the energy they needed to survive. But for you at the pump, this meant the 30-cent gallon was gone forever. Gasoline was no longer just a product of American soil. It was a financial instrument used to support the global dominance of the dollar.
The price was no longer determined by the cost of drilling. It was determined by the needs of the central banks and the volatility of global debt. We traded sound energy for geopolitical energy. As we move our archaeology into the late 1970s and 80s, we see the impact of this shift on the American driveway. This was the era of the incredible shrinking car. In the Golden Age, we didn't care about miles per gallon. We cared about horsepower and style. We had 454 cubic-inch V8 engines that could pull a house. We had heavy steel frames and chrome bumpers that felt like armor. Gas was so cheap that the efficiency of the engine was an afterthought. But as the price of oil skyrocketed during the 1979 crisis, the government introduced CAFE standards, Corporate Average Fuel Economy. This was a direct intervention in the American way of life. Suddenly, the big block was a dinosaur. The engineers were forced to stop focusing on power and start focusing on plastic. To hit the new government mandates, cars had to become lighter, smaller, and more fragile. We saw the rise of the Econobox, 4-cylinder engines that hummed rather than roared. This was the efficiency trap. We were told that better gas mileage would save us money, but look at the math. In 1965, you spent about 5% of your income on energy. Today, despite having cars that are 3 times more efficient, the average American still spends a significant portion of their paycheck just to keep the car moving. Why? Because as the cars became more efficient, the Petro-Dollar system ensured the price of the fuel would rise to capture the difference. The savings didn't stay in your pocket. They were swallowed by the rising cost of the fiat energy system. Furthermore, we entered the plastic age. Since plastic is made from oil, the rising cost of the 30-cent gallon began to infect every other item in the grocery store. The containers, the packaging, the synthetic fabrics in our clothes, everything became a derivative of the petrodollar. We didn't just pay more at the pump, we started paying an energy tax on every single human activity.
Now we must look at the modern squeeze. Why does the price of gas matter more to the 50-plus demographic than almost anyone else? As an economic archaeologist looking at a 2026 retirement budget, energy is the silent predator. When you are working, you can sometimes negotiate a raise to cover the rising cost of your commute. But when you are on a fixed income, an energy spike is a direct hit to your standard of living. The mainstream media tells you that energy is volatile, but they don't tell you that energy is the base layer of all inflation. When the price of diesel goes up, the price of the lettuce in your grocery store goes up. When the price of heating oil goes up, your fixed pension buys less heat. The 30-cent gallon was sound energy because it was backed by domestic production and a stable dollar. Today's $4 or $5 gas is fiat energy. It is subject to speculative surges. Wall Street traders use oil futures as a gambling vehicle, meaning a conflict 5,000 miles away can overnight destroy your ability to afford a cross-country trip to see your grandchildren. This is the mobility squeeze. For the generation that grew up with the freedom of the 1960s road trip, the modern energy market feels like a cage. We are being pushed toward electric vehicles, not because they are better, but because they represent the ultimate centralization of energy. In the Golden Age, you could keep a few cans of gas in the shed and keep your car running for weeks. You had energy sovereignty. But in a world of grid-dependent mobility, your freedom can be turned off with a single digital switch. The 30-cent gallon wasn't just cheap, it was independent. Today's energy is conditional. For the retiree, this means that your net worth is constantly being eroded by an energy system that is designed to be expensive. The system doesn't want you to have cheap mobility because cheap mobility makes you hard to control.
They want energy to be a variable expense that keeps you on the treadmill even after you've stopped working.
So, as we stand at the digital pump in 2026, looking at the rewards screen in the skyrocketing total, what is our golden insight? How do we protect our wealth and our freedom in the age of petrodollars and fiat energy? First, we must think in gallons, not dollars. In the golden age, we knew the value of a gallon. Today, we focus on the price. To protect your retirement, you must hedge your energy consumption. This means, if possible, owning the base layer. Investing in the very energy companies that produce the oil is a way to ensure that when your costs go up at the pump, your dividend income goes up to match it. You become the owner of the valve, not just the consumer. Second, we must value mechanical durability. In an era of disposable cars and plastic efficiency, the most valuable asset you can own is a well-maintained older vehicle that is easy to repair and energy agnostic. A car that doesn't require a software update to start is a freedom asset. Don't trade your mechanical sovereignty for a digital subscription on wheels. Third, we must understand that energy is the real currency. Every dollar you save is essentially a coupon for future energy. If the government prints more dollars, your coupons buy less energy. Therefore, your golden insight is to diversify into hard energy assets, whether that's physical gold, the ultimate energy hedge, energy-producing land, or a home that is energy efficient in the old-fashioned way. Good insulation, wood stoves, and independent water sources. The 30-cent gallon of gas is a ghost. It belongs to an America of chrome, bells, and full service. We cannot go back to 1965, but we can learn the lesson of that era. The lesson is that cheap energy is the foundation of a free middle class. The petrodollar heist of the 1970s tried to turn our mobility into a taxable event. But by understanding the economic archaeology of the pump, you can start to make different choices. You can prioritize independence over convenience. You can protect your legacy by ensuring that your freedom to move isn't dependent on a global banking system. Before we go, I want to ask you, what was the car you drove when gas was 30 cents? And do you remember the first time you realized that the era of cheap oil was over? Share your road trip memories in the comments below. Let's remind the world what it felt like to be truly untethered. Thank you for watching the Golden Age Insight.